Hello and welcome to another hot topic where we discuss the issues affecting East Yorkshire and Northern Lincolnshire. In November 2012, for the first time, we elected police and crime commissioners. The elections across the country had a low turnout. In Humberside, around 19%. The commissioner is responsible for police funds, the tax precept that pays for them, and the tenure of the chief constable. The commissioner is not a police officer. On May the 5th this year, the same day as the council elections, we vote again for police and crime commissioners, and I'm joined now by the candidates for the Humberside force. They are the incumbent commissioner, Matthew Grove, for the Conservatives, Labour's Keith Hunter, and for UKIP, Mike Whitehead. We did invite the Liberal Democrats' Dennis Healy, but he couldn't make it. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming today. The Police and Crime Commissariat is a new institution, and I'll ask you as the only person here who's held it, Matthew, has it worked? In what way is it better than the old police authorities?
Well, it's certainly more visible. The public didn't want police and crime commissioners 4 years ago because they didn't know that they had a police authority, because they weren't visible, they weren't connected to the public. I think what we've seen up and down the country is commissioners are known to their residents, they're connecting with them, and on the whole I think it's been quite successful. I'm very, very proud of the fact that I'm substantially cheaper than the cost of the former police authority, and being able to reinvest that money into crime prevention grants for communities, and that can help to keep the public safe without having extra police officers.
Gentlemen, would you agree? I mean, Keith, there's an element of democratic legitimacy with the PCCs that I suppose the old authorities didn't have.
There is. I mean, I think largely there's a missing opportunity, and I think that's not just going for Matthew. I think across the country there's been an opportunity missed to really connect policing to the public in a way that wasn't the case with police authorities. And I would like to see a development in that way in the future. But I think Matthew is right in that it does bring a visibility to oversight of the police. And if you don't like the way the police force is being run, you can actually vote to change the person who directs the strategy and strategic direction of the police. Whereas with the police authority, it was impossible to change it if you didn't like it because of the way it was constructed.
Well, the old police authorities, Mike, did have the legitimacy that they were largely derived from the democratically elected local governments, local councils. Is having I'm not going to describe Matthew as a dictator or a tyrant, but having one individual, an autocratic rather than a committee-led structure, is that a benefit?
Well, the old committees were appointed from councillors that weren't elected to stand in that role. They were appointed as part of the patronage of the group leader of the ruling party or parties, so that there wasn't that direct link with the legitimacy. So in terms of having a legitimacy because you're being directly elected, that is definitely happening.
Let's talk about the election itself. The 19% turnout in Humberside last time, probably a little bit higher than the rest of the country because the voters of Humberside were particularly active, and also because a very well-known national figure, Lord Prescott, was standing, who you beat, Matthew. So that may have brought the figures up a little bit. It was a low turnout. It was a rainy day in November. It wasn't necessarily at a point where everybody was thinking about politics, especially a new post to be elected. This coming election is on the same day as council elections. Will the public be more interested in deciding between you three than they were last time round?
Well, I personally think they will. It's much better to hold an election in May when the weather's a bit better. People now know what the role is. They know they've got an incumbent, they know who the challenges are, and they've got a very important decision to make. The public are very interested in policing. They know it's a vital public service, and they will choose the person who they think is best placed to continue to hold the police to account.
But how many of them? If only 19, if fewer than 1 in 5 people turn out to make the effort to vote, then what sort of mandate will any of you have should you win the elections?
Well, there will be a better turnout, I'm sure, but some of the local authority areas, we see turnouts in some of the wards as low as 25% anyway. So I think we will see a turnout that's probably approaching 30% this time, which is a significant improvement.
30%, gents, would that be satisfactory? It's about what you would expect from local elections anyway.
Well, I think it also it's been this time there's a danger it's being overtaken by the referendum, which is happening a few weeks later. So yes,
well, you're standing for UKIP. You're the you've been looking for this referendum for all your political career.
yes,
or
but,
all
but,
UKIP's
but I'm
political career
speaking
anyway,
as a
not
police
yours.
and crime commissioner candidate, and you asked the question about whether there's going to be the focus on this, and I think it will be better because of the fact that people will be going to vote for the local authorities. But clearly, in terms of the actual focus, national focus is on the referendum.
Well, Keith, is that not the case that you'll be coming into office, as it were, on the coattails of the local elections? And we'll talk about the psephology and the demographics and where people are voting and where that turnout might come out in a moment. But just that rather more general point, if it weren't for the local elections, people wouldn't necessarily be that interested in the Commissioner's election.
Well, I think that might be the case nationally as well as locally, but I think Mike's right to an extent that this election has been swamped by the EU election. That's all the media have been interested about for a long time. So I think the media has a responsibility to raise the profile of this, and you're doing that now, in the public's mind and bring this to their attention. But I've been all over the areas. I'm sure my colleagues here have been all over the area. And particularly because of the issues that we've had in the Humberside police area over the past year or so, in particular, although it goes back a little bit further than that, there is a particular interest at the moment in policing and a particular concern, and I think that might just generate a lot more interest than we've seen previously and in other parts of the country.
Well, let's go. You're being almost being very discreet there. Let's go a little bit more into the details of what the particular interests of the Humberside Force are. There was a recent report by the Inspectorate of Police, which is now quite historical, and perhaps was quite historical when it was published as well. But there's also concerns over the Chief Constable's expenses and moving down from Dundee, I think, wasn't it, and things like £38,000.
Nationally set, I have no control over that, and also that was very carefully considered by Sir Tom Windsor in his review of all policing terms and conditions, and he said it was essential to encourage senior officers to move about the country to allow that cross-fertilisation. He deliberately kept those allowances to allow the movement of senior officers, because it's essential if you're going to allow forces to learn and develop and improve.
Well, those points are perhaps the prominent ones. Is that what you were alluding to, Keith?
It wasn't the Chief Constable's moving expenses. I mean, Matthew was right. They are set nationally. There are so many other issues with Humberside Police. I think we should focus on those rather than the Chief Constable's expenses, which in the big scheme of things are rather meaningless in terms of cost. Oh, it sounds a lot of money when you look at how millions of pounds have been mismanaged rather than that amount over the past couple of years. That is more of an issue, because we have had year after year now of precept rises, and not one penny of that increase has been spent on policing, whilst police officer numbers have been reducing. And let's face it, Humberside Police has got the biggest proportionate decrease in police officer numbers in the country. The money that is being left unspent by Matthew raising the precept could have paid for permanently over that 3-year period another 100 officers. So we have been punished in this area because of a mismanagement and a disconnect between the strategic financial management of the force and the operational management of the force. And that gap remains at the moment.
So the precept's going up, the income for the force is going up, and your suggestion is that Matthew is putting that into sort of savings, as it were, rather than spending it.
The income for the force hasn't gone up because the national grant has been cut enormously over Matthew's tenure. What the precept does is allow you to offset some of that by raising local taxes through the police element of council tax. And Matthew has put that up by just under 2% over 3 years, which brings in slightly less than £1 million. That doesn't cover the gap, but it's remained unspent.
And £1 million would pay for 10 police officers. Oh, no, actually, no, it would pay for 8 police officers. The fact is, we have had a significant reduction of funding from central government. 3/4 of the money that is provided to provide the policing service comes from central government grants, and they've been reduced by about £45 million. So what the force has had to be doing is reducing its size, saving money, and we've done that so effectively and efficiently that actually we haven't had to eat into the reserves to the same extent as we predicted. But what I would say is this, is that the money isn't sat there in a bank. There is no pot of money. The reserves are theoretical, because what I would have to do is use that, access that money by borrowing it. Now, I don't believe it's right that we should borrow money today to pay for services we're receiving today in order for that to be paid off by our children and grandchildren in the future. So that's why I'm absolutely determined to follow the advice of Mr McCorber and live within our means, and that's what I've encouraged the Chief Constable to do.
That's absolute rubbish.
Well, we'll come back and work out the points there as well and get Mike's point of view, but we have to stop for a minute. Please join me in a couple of minutes' time. Welcome back. Still with me in the studio, my guests Matthew Grove, Keith Hunter and Mike Whitehead, candidates for the Police and Crime Commissionership of the Humberside Force. Keith, Matthew was just explaining his approach to the finances of the force in very straitened circumstances from funds from central government. You indicated that you found it amusing.
Absolutely. I think his grasp on economics is only slightly less firm than his grasp on policing matters, because the fact is that over the past 3 years, on average, Humberside Police has had an underspend of £5.4 million. That's on average over the past 3 years. Matthew has raised the precept during that period of £5.4 million underspends to raise an additional £1 million. If he'd spent those underspends, that would have produced 104 officers over that 3-year period, at a time when neighbourhood policing has been halved.
Well, why are we getting this difference? This seems to be a difference in brute
Well, there's no argument about
10
the fact
officers
that
or 8 officers
they
or
fell underspend, because they were figures provided by Matthew's office on the Freedom of Information request to me that show an average of £5.4 million underspend over the last 3 years. Those are facts provided by Matthew's office.
First of all, you can only spend a reserve once. It doesn't pay for that officer for the next 30 years of their career. Secondly, those reserves are there. Many of them are there for specific reasons. That underspend, some of it is capital underspend. Now, I don't believe in taking pride in spending money as quickly as possible. That's how we got the country into the mess that we are in. I believe in living within your means and making sure that you can fund a policing service, not just this year, but for the next 5, 10 or 20 years. And that's what I've been encouraging the force to do. We also have had the government signalling that they wanted a further up to a 45% reduction out of the policing budget. So we've also had to reduce the numbers of police officers over that time, because you can't make police officers redundant or sack them. Now we are reversing that. The government has come true on its pledge. It's protected funding for policing.
No, it hasn't.
Providing that I put the precept up each year, and that means I can now commit and pledge that I will maintain police officer numbers at their current level at above 1,500 for the foreseeable future, for the next 4 years.
Mike, were you elected? How would you approach the problem of money?
Well, Matthew's actually done a very good job for the Tory Home Secretary. That's what he's there for. That's what police crime commissioners are there for, to take the blame, to take the heat off the Home Secretary. And he has taken resources out of the Humberside police force to the point where I'm afraid the police force in Humberside is ineffective, and we've got a problem that we need to turn that round, and that's going to take time. We're going to have to argue for the extra resources that would be needed to do that, and that is going to be a big challenge for anybody who takes on this role.
Would not all three of you, were you to be elected or re-elected, I mean, part of your job would be as an advocate for more resources
Absolutely.
from central government?
Absolutely.
And that's an argument that you'd all be trying to make, I take
Well,
it.
you would think so, wouldn't you? But over the years, Matthew hasn't raised his voice once publicly to say enough is enough, I'm going to fight for more resources for the Humberside area. And plenty of other police forces, commissioners and chief constables have done that. Matthew and the chief have actually said that they will manage these reductions and the public won't see a change in the service that they receive as a result of these reductions. So we get reduction of money coming from central government. Matthew says we can live within that, and yet he raises the precept to take more taxpayers' money, and we still get a reduced service. So it's greater taxation for a reduced service. And if you look around and speak to people in this area, everyone can see and feel this. Speak to people on the streets. You've had problems in Nunslope just this week, in Grimsby. There was problems in Greatfield in Hull. Recently there was problems in Scunthorpe at the weekend, antisocial behaviour. Those problems are starting to emerge now, and this is the result of underinvestment over a number of years. And Matthew has been an apologist for it. It's as simple as
If we
that.
hadn't had the
Matthew.
incident in Paris a few months ago, the government would have taken more resources out of policing, and they changed their minds and actually put money that they were going to take out back into the budget. And there were police and crime commissioners, including a Tory police and crime commissioner in North Yorkshire, that was actually about to challenge that funding formula. Matthew didn't challenge that.
The reason I didn't challenge that funding formula change is that Humberside Police would have had £5 million more. So the idea that I would challenge the government to say don't give more money to my police force area is just ridiculous. What I did do is that in October last year, had a face-to-face meeting with the Home Secretary, Theresa May, and I directly raised with her my concerns. And I told her that I saw a tipping point in policing coming, and I made her aware of that, and I urged her to be doing all she could to actually maintain and protect policing funding. Now, I'm not claiming all the credit for the change in the government's position. I do accept that was majority of their pressure was brought about due to Paris, but I played my part in it. Getting the government to change its position isn't about shouting and taking a public position. It's about quiet, considered, professional lobbying. And that's what I've done on behalf of the public of this area. And I think by doing that, I've achieved more.
What about this point that there has been a reduction in the service, perhaps out of efficiency, perhaps out of necessity, but that the lid's coming off the pot, that there's trouble in Scunthorpe, there's trouble, which is
all over.
Perhaps going to be a more prosperous town now than we might have feared a few months ago, but in the Nunsthorpe estate in Grimsby as well, and no doubt north of the estuary as well. Are we just not sufficiently policed? And,
No.
And how did we get to that point?
When I came to office, I inherited a force that for a generation had bumped along the bottom of most national comparators of policing.
That's not right.
I challenged the Chief Constable to say, why is this? Because I don't think it's down to the individual dedication and professionalism of the police officers.
To some extent, it's down to the number of police officers.
Well, no, it's not about how many police officers you have, because I discovered, for instance, that our police officers spent a huge amount of their time doing admin work in police stations because they were filling forms in while they were out on duty and then having to go and sit at terminals and fight over the terminals, and they were spending 2 hours of their shift in police stations. I got £2 million from central government. I gave them the mobile technology. They're now spending up to 20% more of their shift time out on patrol, on the beat, preventing crime. I also discovered we had police officers that weren't on duty at the busy times when the public needed them. I found out that the busiest time for policing was August. It was the time we had fewest number of police officers on duty. That's why Humberside Police had to restructure. So we made every single police officer as efficient and effective as they could be. It's not just about how many police officers you have, it's about what you allow them to do. It's getting them out of police stations, getting them in communities where they can stop crimes from happening.
Is there anything controversial in that, and getting police officers out there and not sitting in offices doing bureaucracy?
Unfortunately, that doesn't appear to be the reality. I mean, I had launched my campaign in Hornsey, which is a town on the east coast in Yorkshire, and their police officers now come on duty in Bridlington. And the officer locally was saying that by the time we've had our briefing and travelled to Hornsey, there is no cover in Hornsey for an hour and a half each morning, and then when we go back on our shift in the evening. So we want real policemen in local areas running a local police service, not virtual coppers. We want actual coppers on the streets, and we want them in the local areas, local coppers looking after the local community.
And how would you pay for them?
You're talking about neighbourhood policing there.
But forgive me, Matthew, how would you pay for them?
Well, we got to look at what resources are available and make sure that they're being used in the most effective way. I've got to talk to we haven't been allowed. I haven't been allowed. I don't know whether you have, to talk to the Chief Constable yet. I would like to talk to her to find out if this is a police service that she is proud of, and what she would do with a new police commissioner in post to see if we can get a much more effective service. But we've got to talk to central government, we've got to talk to the local authorities, we've got to look at what budgets are available to make sure that we've got more PCSOs, more police officers in the local community, serving the needs of the area.
Keith, very tight budgets, possibility of putting the precept up again. What would you do? What would you do differently?
Well, there's an expression called resource leverage, and that's a key element of business planning within policing. And I was one of the original people to push business planning in policing, because many senior officers, and I include chief constables in this, do not like the business side of policing. You get strategic financial managers who don't like the operational side of policing. If you bring those together with a good business planning process, you can actually deliver more on the streets. We have at the moment a reorganisation which Matthew ordered, the chief constable carried out, and there is no mincing of words about this. There was gross mismanagement of that reorganisation. Overnight,
So
police officers...
whose words are those?
Those are my words. Gross mismanagement, and the evidence is clear to see. Overnight, neighbourhood policing disappeared from the streets. You go into communities and speak to them, and they'll say, immediately after the reorganisation, neighbourhood officers, PCSOs that had been there for a long time just literally disappeared. And they're coming back in dribs and drabs now as Matthew and the chief realises what a massive mistake they made.
Well,
but in that reorganisation, the duties weren't worked out right. There were no people coming on duty for nights. They hadn't taken into account flexible working arrangements when drawing up the duties. Now, G4S, when they messed up the Olympics, they were held up to account in front of a parliamentary committee. Where was Matthew holding the chief constable to account over this? There was none of that openness and public accountability that Matthew was responsible for. What he did was he defended the chief constable. The public had no voice in this.
Keith, we're going to have to go to a break there. Matthew, you can come back to that point immediately after we come back. Please come back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. I'm still with Matthew Grove, Keith Hunter and Mike Whitehead, candidates for the Police and Crime Commissionership of Humberside. You were just being accused of, I think the phrase was gross mismanagement there, Matthew, by Keith, and that the number of neighbourhood officers has dwindled and disappeared under your watch.
No, I made it a requirement of the reorganisation that neighbourhood protection was protected. On paper it was, the numbers were maintained and in fact enhanced. But there were some teething problems with the restructure. It was a huge restructure. It was never going to be seamless. There was always going to be issues that need addressing, and those things happened. I obviously heard it from the public. I'm at public meetings most nights. I heard it from local councillors, and I challenged the Chief Constable to put those things right. Same thing happened with 101 performance. There was a dip for certain reasons for a few months, but now 101 is performing better than most forces.
Just better tell us what 101 is. We're not
That's the non-emergency number.
Okay.
Now we see 101 performance actually one of the best in the country, certainly significantly improved, and I'm happy with it. I did challenge the Chief Constable, but at the same time, the Chief Constable was having to put right decades of mismanagement, in my opinion. I spoke about that culture of complacency and denial. When I came to office, every time I said, well, why are we so poor in this area? Oh, don't worry about it, Commissioner. That's how it's always been. You know, it's just how it is.
That's
well,
absolute
no, that's
rubbish.
not. That's not acceptable. Police officers have this culture of always wanting to gloss things, to say, yeah, everything's fine on my watch. They always want to say they were the best ever. Well, my job is to actually be the spokesman for the public, to be their voice and to say that's not good enough, we must improve. Because I am driven by the needs of the public. I'm driven by the faces of the people I meet who are the victims of crime every single month.
I've got to say that Matthew started out his campaign the previous time with the big lie that Humberside Police has bounced along the bottom for a decade. There was a report by HMI in 1997 or 98.
You're going to have to forgive me if I invoke parliamentary language here.
Her Majesty's Inspector
the big lie
of
might be pushing the solicitor's blood pressure a little bit.
Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary put out a report that put Humberside as a top 10 force in the late 90s. It's as simple as that. That is a fact. You can access that report now. That is there. What Matthew was talking about, and it shows a very superficial understanding of what police performance is about, he is talking about comparative crime rates between the Humberside area and other police force areas, which are caused by many things such as deprivation, the amount of internal investment, the number of police, many things. It isn't about police performance, which is measured by a whole suite of indicators in other areas. That is one of them. A crime trend may be taken as a partial indicator of police performance, but not comparative crimes per head of population between police force areas. It is a very superficial way of looking at police performance, and that's what led him into this situation where the real performance felt by communities has nosedived.
Well, it's a matter of lies, damn lies and statistics here, isn't it? You're going to be measuring these things by a proportional ratio or as absolute figures. I want to just move on from that, because since there's no, without producing graphs and whiteboards, there's no way of resolving this.
Well, can I say one thing to you? I actually
Matthew.
met very early on with the principal inspector from Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, who made it very, very clear to me, Matthew, you need to do something here, because the performance of Humberside is utterly unacceptable and has been for many, many years.
You're all standing representing political parties, Conservative, UKIP, Labour. I think I can detect very easily a Conservative-Labour distinction here, an ideological distinction which is perfectly reflected in the Chancellor of the Exchequer's policy of austerity. You don't want to have debts that future generations will be paying, and you would like to see expenditure and the rewards of expenditure in the here and now. Would that be a very simplified attempt to find the distinction between you two?
Not necessarily. I certainly don't believe in austerity, but I believe, and I think my record shows, that I am very careful about how money is spent and ensuring that we get a proper bang for the buck. And at the moment we're not. We're being taxed and we're getting a reduced service. Increased taxation for reduced service is never acceptable, and that's what we're getting at the moment.
What is the UKIP policy on policing? Because UKIP is a party designed with really one objective in mind, which is withdrawal from the European Union. I'm not entirely sure how a police and crime commissioner can help enhance that objective.
Well, of course, if we did withdraw from the European Union, we'd have more money to spend on police resources. But
Yes, but that's no reason to be standing to be responsibility for the use of those resources.
Well, hopefully that will be the case, and we will be in a position where we will be able to allocate resources that are currently being wasted in other areas. But
Okay,
what
I'm not sure I
would
can let you get away with that just completely. I will go no further than to point out that it is not a fact that there would be more money were we to withdraw from the European Union. It is possibly an opinion with as much merit as any other opinion, but I don't think we can just adduce that as a fact.
Well, we actually get only 50% of the money that we actually put into the European Union back. So I'm talking about those resources that would be able to be used for other things. And Boris Johnson this morning, a Tory, was actually saying that it could be all put into the NHS. But we're here to talk about police and crime. I think the most important thing is that morale amongst the police officers is at rock bottom. Whether the police force was the most wonderful police force or the worst, clearly we have a problem now, and clearly the public do not have the perception that they're getting a good service. And there are lots of reports of people are in our communities that feel that they are abandoned.
So what would
by the
UKIP do
police.
about that, though? What's
Well,
the UKIP view,
well, the
UKIP
Conservative
vision?
Party always used to be the party of law and order, and I think that that's something that is completely flipped about. We certainly stand for law and order, strong police forces, working with the community, working in the locality policing, local police officers looking after local services. That's the most important thing. I don't necessarily think we ideologically fit into either camp. We are a none of the above party. And I think that what we're looking for is the best resources for the
Are you
the
surprised to find that a candidate for the Police and Crime Commissionership believes in law and order?
No, I'm surprised actually that he's saying that he will prioritise the morale of the police officers. My priority is the protection service of the public. What I discovered is that large areas of Humberside Police had ceased to be a 24/7, 365-day-a-year service. They'd actually become Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Victims of sexual crime didn't get the support of specially trained officers, specially trained detectives during the weekend and at nights. How can that be right? So what I have encouraged and supported the Chief Constable to do is to actually get the officers on duty at the times that the public need them, which is evenings, nights, weekends, and in the months of July and August, the busiest times. Is that popular?
So you've stopped
with police
policemen
officers?
with
Is
children taking holidays
Yes.
at the times when the children are off school.
Yes,
That's clearly
absolutely.
ridiculous.
No, it's not.
And morale is at rock bottom, and it is important. No effective police force can work. No, any organisation can work with a disengaged workforce, and this police force, is morale is right at the bottom, and we've got to do something about that, because they can't protect the public unless we protect them.
We just had 2,000 applications for 100 posts. There are people queuing up to become police officers. It's a vocation.
How many people are
do
leaving
not-
the force before their usual
They,
retirement time?
very, very, very few. They all wait until they've got their full 30 years and go with a full pension. It's almost golden handcuffs, really.
Okay. I suppose that's appropriate in a way, isn't it? Keith, you're shaking your head.
Well, there are more officers leaving now, and a lot more officers who want to leave, and other people escape the service. Morale is rock bottom. Is that all Matthew's fault? No, to be fair to him, it isn't all Matthew's fault. But he does bear some responsibility when he rubbishes the efforts of generations of police officers in producing results for the public. Now, let me finish
Well,
this. Now,
that's my
let,
job,
is
to
not to
fight
rubbish
for the
police
public.
officers.
No, I'm not rubbish. I understand how they are dedicated professional people, and
Well,
the vast
that didn't
majority,
sound like that.
the vast majority are driven by true vocation, but not all of them. And I will never ever apologise for putting the interest of the public first. That's what they elect me for. It's for the Chief Constable to balance those demands with the home life interests of officers and staff. I absolutely saw that the pendulum that swings between the professional interests of the officers and their home life had swung far too far toward their home life interests.
Matthew,
we had
can I take the spade off you? You've done quite enough.
20% of police officers were on flexible working contracts, which meant they came to work at the times that suited them, not when the public needed
Okay,
them.
we've taken that point,
Right,
Matthew,
okay.
and Keith, you were just saying that
I think we need to get a bit of balance into this. Morale in any organisation is a huge factor in terms of delivering a good quality service at the point of contact with the customer. So you've got to have good morale. No organisation will function
if
at its
you wanted
maximum
absolutely
effectiveness.
perfect morale, you double everybody's pay and send them on holiday for 6 months. a year.
Absolutely not, because money might be the thing that drives you, but it isn't the thing that drives everyone, okay? There are different things that
Promise you,
drive
nobody
different
who
people.
works here is driven by money, Keith.
Okay, well, police officers tend not to be driven by money either, and that's a simple fact. Now, there are some officers who obviously want to earn some more, but in terms of how do you raise morale, you make officers feel valued, you make sure that they feel as though they have a voice and that they are delivering
Working for an
a
effective
good
service.
Exactly, working for an effective service where people care about. That's all they actually ask for, and that has been taken away
I'm
from
sorry, gents, we're going to have to stop there just for one last break, but we'll come straight back to this after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the final part of this week's Hot Topic with my guests Matthew Grove, the incumbent Humberside Police and Crime Commissioner, Keith Hunter and Mike Whitehead, candidates for his job in the elections on the 5th of May. Matthew, Keith was just saying that you have been damaging to the morale of the police officers in Humberside. You wanted to answer that point.
Well, I did. If you want an example of the inherent conflict sometimes between the morale of officers and staff and the interests of serving and protecting the public, look at crewing. In Humberside, pretty well all police officers and all PCSOs went everywhere in pairs. That halves their availability, halves their visibility and accessibility. Whereas in neighbouring Lincolnshire, for many years, the position has been single crewing. So they end up getting double the effect, double the visibility. We've now moved to a safe crewing policy, so we have increasingly PCSOs patrolling alone in those areas where there is no significant risk to them. That's got to be the right thing. Do they like that? No, because they actually do like to walk along and chat to each other. But we, the public, need them to be talking to the public. We need them to be keeping their eyes and ears open. So I see that as an example where it's absolutely the right thing to put the public's interest first and to have more single crewing, single patrolling, because that way we increase the effectiveness of our resources.
If you've got an area and a time where a single police officer on their own is sufficient, and presumably, any force or violence that is required to be resisted, one person can do it. then do you need to be policing that area at all?
Well, yes, you do, because we have some areas where there is virtually never, ever any crime. But don't forget that probably 80% of what police officers do isn't crime-related. They get involved in a lot of other things. Our neighbourhood police officers and PCSOs, they're doing a lot of other things. They're preventing crime. So it's really important in those areas we maximise that effect by making sure that they aren't going everywhere in pairs.
Keith, how would you change the accountability of a Chief Constable to the Police and Crime Commissioner?
Well, I think that's one area where the current Commissioner Matthew has been sadly lacking. We're probably one of the only forces.
Several areas.
Yeah, well, this is one of them where I think the public can really feel it. The Commissioner should close the gap between the police and the public. And the Chief Constable should be publicly held to account for the performance of the force. We're one of the only forces where the public gets no access to that accountability mechanism. In other forces, it's either put on the web or it's open to the public so they can see what the Commissioner is actually doing to get the Chief Constable to answer for the quality of policing on the streets.
Well, what do you want? So the emails, memos in the communication between Commissioner and Chief Constable should be
No, there should be an open public meeting where the public can have a voice and submit questions, and the Commissioner should be there representing the people. Whenever Matthew talks about the police, he talks we, all of the time. It's we've done this, we've done that. We, for the Commissioner, should be the public, we the public. He speaks as though he's the spokesperson for the Chief Constable, and I have spoken to so many people that really feel that gap.
How many public meetings has the police, has the Chief Constable gone to? How many interviews to the press and to the TV has the Chief Constable? Anything to do with the police, Matthew is the public face of the police. That is wrong.
It is.
And it should be the Chief Constable that's explaining what the issues are, what she's going to do about it, and making sure that it does happen. And unfortunately, the media tell me, local media tell me, that they don't have access to her. They can't get access to her.
Correct.
Now, whether that's because Matthew tells her not to go
Absolutely
on there,
not.
or whether she
Absolutely
decides not to take part in that process, whatever it is, under me, that's going to change.
You can't make the Chief Constable. You don't have
I
the
would
power.
want the Chief Constable to be the public face of the police,
But you can't
not me.
You can't make the Chief Constable do that. She's in charge of her own organisation. You're a separate legal entity.
You're responsible for her hiring and firing. You set her objectives. You could say to her, I want you to be the public face of the police and be accountable to the people of North Humberside and South of the Humber.
I encourage the Chief Constable to do that, but she's also very keen to get all sorts of officers on there. So you will see PCs, you'll see superintendents, you'll see inspectors. I think that's important as well, that the public have that connection with all levels of the force, and you will see that in the media
Can I just
regularly.
say, when the force was graded inadequate, and then it was followed up by being graded as requires improvement, the Deputy Chief Constable was pushed out to make the excuses then, not the Chief Constable. What is it that has to drag the Chief Constable out there? Matthew took a step backward for once in his life then, and the Deputy Chief Constable was pushed forward to take the brunt. The Chief should be fronting that up. That was the worst thing to have happened to Humberside Police in a decade, and the Chief Constable never spoke openly in public about it. She pushed the Deputy forward, and Matthew took a step backward at that point and tried to say that the following appraisal that said the force was good in terms of its fairness superseded the previous two assessments, when they didn't. There were assessments on 3 different areas of the force. One was requires improvement, one was inadequate, and one was good. And Matthew deliberately tried to keep that from the public.
I didn't deliberately try to keep that from the public. I have a police and crime panel with members from your party on that. I presented to them all the evidence. They had access to the report, and they were satisfied with the explanations to the point where they unanimously agreed to write to HMRC to raise some concerns about the process and the timing. So to actually say I hid it is, I think, disingenuous.
Well, on Radio Humberside, that's exactly what you did when you were asked by Bernsey if the report on fairness superseded the previous 2, and you fluffed around and basically said, yes it does, we're good now. That's what you said.
No, you've got to remember that assessment, that inspection was carried out just a few weeks into the implementation of the largest restructure ever. what we've had since is 40 inspections. HMIC have been in constantly. They are in every force. And we've seen steady progress. And we're now seeing improvements in the crime figures. We're now seeing homicide lift off the bottom. So I not only see green shoots, I'm seeing some vigorous branches sprouting out of the new force structure.
Crime's gone up every year under
We can just go back to the matter of accountability, though, and the visibility or lack of visibility of Julia Curran, the Chief Constable. The criticisms you make seem to be criticisms of her rather than of the way that the Office of Commissioner has been
to hold the
commissioned.
Chief Constable to account on behalf of the public. So if the Chief Constable goes missing in action, we don't see her, the press can't get access to her. Who is the one person that can actually make the Chief Constable come forward and tell us exactly what is going on in Humberside Police? That's what
And
the
this feeds through
Commissioner's
to the
role is
morale
for.
issue as
Yes,
well.
it does.
If you haven't got your leadership...
So for both of you two, may I infer from this that were you to be elected, the Chief Constable would be given the instructions, get yourself in front of the cameras,
Absolutely.
Definitely.
or pack your bags and go back to Scotland?
Well, first of all,
I
let's
think
try and
she-
do it properly
yes,
by
exactly.
just agreeing with her that that is a good thing to do. I don't know whether she's been stopped from doing that, and I think it's important
Okay,
that she does have an understanding
let me make this
that
clear.
this is such an important part of her role.
I think I know what Matthew's going to say.
I encourage the Chief Constable,
not
Justine
working,
Curran,
Matthew.
to appear before the media because I think she's very good at it.
Yeah.
She's a very capable professional officer and I'm proud of very much of what she's doing. Does she get everything right? Of course she doesn't. She's a human being. But the idea that I'm hiding her from the public is absolutely nonsense. I take the view, though, that whenever I am asked to give an explanation by the press, I will always front up and I will give the answers to the best of my ability because I am there to be answerable to the public, and the only way I can do that effectively is through the press. I can do lots of evening meetings as I do, go to community groups, but ultimately it's media outlets like you that can give the information to the public that I need them to
But
hear
you come
and the
across as an
explanations.
apologist for the
Absolutely.
issues rather than somebody who's going to hold up the Chief Constable to account to change and make things better.
It's very easy to bandstand and to set up some choreographed sort of kangaroo court arrangement. Some
That's
police and crime
not what
commissioners have
this
done
is,
that.
I hope. But,
No. I mean, you know, I could arrange for some theatrical type of event where I have, you know, the Chief Constable in the witness box, and I'm there holding court. I could even have a wig on, couldn't I? Would that actually help to improve policing? Would that be the right thing for the public of this area? No, I don't think it would.
but it might improve accountability.
I am holding the Chief Constable to the account
How do we know?
in the way that I do.
How do we
well,
know?
that is for the police and crime panel to then challenge
Who
me and
are a
hold me to
toothless
account.
tiger, aren't they?
Well, they are your colleagues from your party. Are
I
you
don't care who they
criticising
are,
your
they're a
Labour
toothless
councillors?
tiger. They're a toothless tiger and they live
Well,
off
they're not.
what you feed them largely and don't necessarily understand it because you've hidden, or the police have hidden, this movement of reserves from the current account into the savings account. Mid-year, they move this in so that the police and crime panel, unless they dig deeply and really understand these things, and luckily I do because I spent many years looking at this, I know that this movement of cash was hidden mid-year so it wouldn't appear.
And has done for 19 years. Out of 19 out of the last 20 years, Humberside Police has underspent. It's a deep cultural-rooted thing.
They don't sit on a 19% reserve, which is way above
This is too
national
technical, really,
guidelines.
isn't it? We're getting into areas
frustrates
that
me.
people won't understand.
I'm afraid we're going to have to stop now, gentlemen, anyway. Thank you very much for coming in. And it's certainly not a dull election, this one. With a bit of luck, we've raised the turnout to about 90%. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to join in the conversation, hashtag Hot Topic. Email your views to hottopic@news.tv. Until next week, goodbye.